Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good start to their week thus far, or whenever you get to watch this. I hope you're having a good day. We are joined today by a guest that I believe it's coming up on maybe probably a year since we've had Mr. John Good on. But his first episode that he joined us on was, I think, one of the first times, maybe the first time he spoke publicly about SOG, and it blew up. I think it's at like 38,000 views now, which is crazy to think that many people are starting to get interested in SOG and watching that. But those of y'all who have not watched that or new to the channel, I've linked those into the show notes so you can catch up and watch some episodes of Mr. John if you don't get to catch this live and contribute questions. But I took viewer questions from Twitter and from other places and got them to Mr. John about gear, about missions, and some of the other stuff. And he's been kind enough to let us hear some of his history and how he ran things while he was in SOG and what he was doing at certain locations while with SOG. So, Mr. John, thank you for joining us, and I hope you're doing well today. And I guess if you want to just jump straight into this thing, I believe the first question, which is usually high up on the list of talking to a SOG veteran, what was it like serving with the men at FOB2 CCC, like Mr. John Plaster, Joe Walker, Bob Howard, Newman Ruff, Doug Miller, Glenn Umera, and the list could go on. But what was it like serving with men like that?
We had a lot of notable guys there, for sure. Bob Howard, probably one of the most notable. Bob Howard, I don't know, he was a poster SF guy. I mean, he was, if they were going to make a poster of an SF guy, that would be Bob Howard, right? I mean, he was very, very put together, very, very sharp, very fit, didn't smoke, didn't drink. You know, he was a piece of work, but he was the real deal. He was the real deal. And Joe Walker, the first time I met him was in Bangkok at the Opala Hotel or Opera Hotel, and he had been on a detached assignment with the agency up in Thailand and Laos somewhere. And I don't know how we got talking about it. He found out I was from Kontum, and he said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "I'm going back to CCC. I'm going to Kontum when I leave here." He said, "You got to come up to my room," and took me up to his room, and he pulled out a big parachute kit back and opened it up, and he had it full of the little mini grenades and just all kinds of stuff that wasn't at that point in time wasn't really available in Vietnam. And I said to him, I said, "How are you going to get that back in country?" And he had a bunch of CIA stickers. And so he boxed them all up, put these CIA stickers on them, and had the embassy ship them over, and they ended up in Kontum. That was my introduction to Joe Walker. But again, he was another one. He was a real deal.
Wow. So. And you ended up the other two men, Mr. Glenn and Newman. You ended up, you actually worked with both of them, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, Newman Ruff was actually when I first arrived in country. He was the 1-0 of the first team I was on, and RT Arizona, and I learned a lot from Ruff. Was an odd character, but at times, but learned a lot from him. He was a good recon man. He knew his stuff, and but he had a love for a 30 caliber carbine he used to carry all the time. And
I was gonna say, guys, there's some famous photos floating around the internet that you can find with Mr. Newman and his 30 cal. It's a great photo.
We went on a POW snatch one time, and he said, so we set up, we found this bunker down by trail that was abandoned, and we hid some people in that and set up a couple of claymores down at either end of the trail. And Ruff said, well, what I'll do, I'll shoot somebody when they walk by, I'll shoot them in the leg. And then you guys, talking to down the guys in the bunker, jump out and grab him, right? So I said, you sure about that? And he said, oh yeah. He said, no problem. So here comes this guy down the trail after a while, and he's got this big rucksack on, right? And you could tell it was full, right? He's walking down the trail, and Ruff pop, right? And you could see the guy walking and see his leg kind of go like that when he got hit. Popped up and took off running flat out. And they, to stop him, they had to blow the claymore. So, but so I don't know. I always thought that 30 cal was a little bit, but he loved it. So
there's Mr. Newman right there.
That's Kinnear there, and that's Joe Walker. Yeah.
I think that's Mr. Newman actually right there.
That might be, yeah.
On the right.
Yeah.
Right
yeah. Yeah.
Quite both great recon men right there.
Yeah,
Mr. Bob was 1-0 of RT Washington. Guys, y'all should know from Mr. Howard Sugar talking about him. CCC was just full of not only amazing 1-0s, but just all around amazing recon men. Just outstanding.
Yeah, well, they all spent a lot of time exchanging information and, lessons learned. And that's what most of the time in the club was spent, guys sitting around talking about what happened on this mission, what we did on that mission, how this worked, how this didn't work. Kind of, it was a constant exchange of information.
Wow. And didn't Mr. Norm Doney there for a period of time, didn't he put out little think sheets and they had tactics or things that that teams did right, or that they had little classes that teams would teach what they did on a particular mission or what have you?
Yeah. I mean, we were all, you were always looking for a better way to do something, or to learn something that had from something that happened. So you obviously didn't repeat it, right?
Absolutely.
But somebody asked, did I wear a cravat, headband, or a boonie cap, and why? And I always wore a headband, and for 2 or 3 reasons. One, a boonie cap I found kept getting knocked off in the jungle, because we weren't walking on trails. We were actually going through the jungle. So it was a constant irritation getting knocked off. I mean, you could put a thing, but even so, So I started wearing a headband, and I found it was better for helping keep the sweat out of my eyes, because it got soaked up in the headband. And my hair would end up, not that I have much now, but at the time would get all, broke up I found it broke up my profile better. So, I did carry a boonie hat, which that guy there is Nay Soot. He was on our team on Texas.
That's some gnarly terrain and bush right there.
And but I carried a boonie hat, but mainly for at night, and I would use it as a semi pillow or pull it over my face.
Wow. Someone was asking, let me pull my questions back up. We were talking about gears, gear, I should say. And since we were kind of talking on that, the leggings, everyone interested on CCC, and interesting that y'all are the only ones that did it, that as far as I can tell, wore leggings. Did all of your teams wear leggings while in the field?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I actually, I found a Army Navy store one time when I was visiting my mom and dad in Little Rock, and they had a whole bunch of those lace-up leggings. So I bought a whole slew of them and shipped them back to Pontoon, and so gave them out to all our team. And but everybody wanted, so I was having my mom and dad go down to an Army Navy store and buy up whatever they had and send them over. But they were really good because they would keep bugs and leeches and all that kind of stuff out, because you could get them, they ran down, a strap went under your boot, you could tighten it up, tighten it down good. So your pants would be tucked into your boots laced up or zipped, in my case, zipped up, and then the leggings going over that and secured and laced up and come up to about mid calf. So they really were good and protected your legs and stuff from getting up in them. Then I also carried a knife down in the side of my right side legging.
Oh, wow. Did not know that. That's interesting to hear. I did not know you carried a knife and a legging.
Well, I carried 4 knives, actually.
Oof. Wow.
I carried a SOG or a K-bar on my web gear, usually up here on the left side. I carried a buck Kalinga down on my right leg in the legging. I had a buck folder, what is it, the 110 in the black little pouch. Well, I had that on my pants belt. All right. And then I had the banana knife in my pack. That came out right here. The bolo.
Was that the bolo? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. You were loaded down. Let's see.
There was,
you see a knife right there, actually.
Yeah. The reason I think we talked about this once before about layers. So, depending on which way you go, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. So layer 1, I could get rid of the rucksack and keep biting and keep moving. All right. Layer 2 was the web gear, which if I lost that, I still had my Browning high power with 3 mags and my buck knife and my Kalinga on my legging still attached to my body.
Wow. That's interesting. We've heard a few guys carrying, but I don't know if they did it quite like that. That's I've always found your layering method to be quite interesting, and seemed like it would be a good way to do things.
I wasn't the only one that did that kind of thing, I don't think. But
wow, and it seems like, or at least the few guys that I've spoken to or on Facebook, I've been able to ask. It seemed there weren't all that many guys that felt the need to carry pistols and felt like they much rather carry more CAR-15 ammo or grenades. But I would think carrying a pistol just as whatever you'd like to say, final stand or whatever you need to get out of for yourself type situation. It seems like carrying a pistol might be a good idea.
Sidearms weren't as common back then as they are today. I mean, it's almost a given. Everybody has a sidearm today in the military, but back then it wasn't as common. Certainly if you, a lot of guys did carry them, but it was a personal choice kind of thing, and certainly not required by any stretch. But I liked having that Browning as a last ditch item.
Yeah, and it seems like most of the guys that I've spoke to carried one of those. I know Mike Shepard carried his 45, but it seems like you, Larry White, John Plaster, and a few other guys that I think Ed may have too, carried a Browning high power as their backup.
I still got one. It's a great gun, shoot well, very accurate,
That's my dream pistol right there.
I'll come visit. I'll let you shoot mine.
I may hold you up to that actually, sir. um, you would we were actually just speaking about this offline, and I've got the photo. But could you talk about the was it common for recon men to have zippers or use zippers on their cross border boots?
Well, again, I think it was kind of a personal choice kind of thing. Some guys did and some didn't. I mean, oh, those are in the front. Okay. I was thinking of another set, but I liked them just because it made it quicker to get them on and off, and didn't have to fiddle around with laces and things. And like I said, in the field, if you were changing socks, uh, obviously you had to take your boots off. So getting them on and off quickly was a good thing,
Oh yeah. And I can see now that you mention it, you got it sewn in the zipper, but you still got the capability, like you mentioned, if you did want to strap up to get super tight, you could still use your laces to tighten.
I go up a little higher.
You mean like this?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. See, now that I've got canteen covers there. I later switched over. There's you can see my Browning on my side there. But later I switched over to BAR pouches. And I like them a lot better.
And I think one of the questions we'll be dealing with that. I'm glad you mentioned you like those better, and I've heard a lot of people say that. But the issue always comes up, and especially with the new guys that may not have watched very often or don't quite know, except for maybe seeing Tilt or Lynn Black and Tiger Stripes, thinking they're about to go on a mission. Did you ever wear Tiger Stripes in Laos?
I never did. I never wore them on a mission. I wore them on bright light, just, banging around. In fact, Bill Spurgeon and I used to wear Tiger Stripes, a black jungle sweater, and shoulder holsters. And we'd go up to the MACV compound for breakfast and get a lot of odd looks up there. But no, I never wore them in the jungle. I had two sets of fatigues that I wore in the field. One was a custom made green set that were tailored closely and had zipper pockets and pockets on the upper sleeves on either side and so on, right? They tucked in to your pants as opposed to hanging out loose. Okay. And then those we spray painted, right? Mm-hmm. Black, green, brown, whatever spray paint, right? The other set was just black, just a pure black set of fatigues. Okay. Similar, with the setup and the tailoring and everything, but they were just black. And those were in the event that we were going into triple canopy.
Wow. Okay. I did not know that you actually, excuse me, frog in my throat, actually had a black set that you used also. Very interesting.
Yeah. Just depended on the area that we were going into.
And I've got a photo here of the CRP, and I'm trying to see what camo you might have. It looks like just green ODs. Let me pull this up and see. Looks like you've got an M79 vest on too, actually.
Oh yeah, I do.
And it looks like maybe
because I had a grenade launcher attached to my Car 15. See, like that one there.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Like I think that may be Ranger Melvin right there.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Wow.
But yeah, the CRP. You had a question about the CRP. That was made up of 3 teams. It was RT Texas, RT Hawaii, with Emmett Dover, who was 1-0 there, and RT California with Joe Walker. And the CRP, the reason it came, which CRP stood for Combat Recon Platoon. And the reason it came about was after Sante, we got to talking and said, we were always on the lookout for reports of POW camps and whatnot in Laos and Cambodia. And we said, well, suppose one came in, what would we do about it? How would we respond to it if they said, well, go, we found a POW camp. Go do what? So we came up with the CRP, and we trained and worked with the 20th SOS Air Force turbo helicopters for special insertions. And that's what the CRP was primarily organized and designed for, was to attack a POW camp, land in the perimeter, or get as close as possible, using the 20th SOS ships. Our tactics were carried no food. The only thing we carried was ammo and first aid stuff. We had, oh God, if I can remember, we had a knee mortar, 60 millimeter knee mortar. We had I think it was 6 RPGs. We had about 6 or 8 RPDs.
Oof.
And we had about 3 or 4 rifle grenade capable rifles. And I don't remember how many CAR 15s with the M79 launchers on them, but quite a few.
I've noticed in a few pictures with the Recon guys, and I'm wondering if CRP ever had them around or if they were around at all very often. Laws are popping up in one of these new Jason Hardy books.
The what?
M72 Laws, LAW.
Oh, Laws. Oh, yes. Yeah. We had Laws. I didn't like Laws a whole lot. But we had some, and in the CRP, I believe we carried some, had a few. But we had, like I said, we had like 6 RPGs. So they weren't, I mean, one of the things put me off about a law was the fact that one time on the range, a guy was opening one up. When he opened it up, it fired.
Oh.
Fortunately, there was nobody standing behind it, and it was pointed down range. So,
oh my gosh.
So made me a little bit leery of them. And some guys reported having trouble getting them to function. You'd open them up and then it wouldn't
like
work
Lang
right.
Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the RPG was simple, rarely failed,
Joe Walker
very
proved
effective.
that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Toby Todd used to carry one all the time.
Absolutely.
And he had to cut down the RPG launcher, and carried a little cutoff. I think it was an M79 that he carried on his side. So I remember one time he got into an RPG duel with an NPA gunner.
Yes, sir. And he also had a special M79 pouch, not only for himself that he carried the warheads in, but he made each endage had a special back piece that they carried 2 or 3 rockets in there.
Yeah, that's like that CRP. We all carried, we all had backpacks, but in the backpacks we carried extra mortar rounds and RPG rounds.
Oh man!
So
did y'all ever get? I mean, considering it's going to be a dumb question, considering y'all are only looking for POWs, but did y'all ever at least get to go out on a training to where y'all could at least maybe have mixed it up on with people? Or
we went out a couple of times. We never got in any serious fights. I remember when we did a couple of demonstrations for some brass, came up from Saigon and watched, and we went out to the yard range, and we started out, and then I don't know, somebody fired a shot, and we went online assaulting forward, right, with the little mortar team falling back and pumping mortar, and afterwards one of one of the guys from some general from Saigon, he said, I wouldn't put a reinforced rifle company up against those guys.
Holy crap, that is crazy. I bet that was wild seeing them dropping in at 60, just boom, 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 boom.
Well, that at the range, there was a berm down at the end of the range. And so when we started shooting, that was the target. And there was so much dirt and smoke kicked up that it totally obscured the whole berm.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I would, there's a lot of things I wish better cameras or film cameras were around for SOG situations, but seeing the CRP training or doing IA drills, that is something I would pay a fortune to see footage of.
Well, the thing that was good about the 20th SOS was their helicopters were the turbo. They were dual engine turbo. They had a lot of power. So we could get, whereas on a Huey, if you got 6 guys on a Huey, you were straining its capabilities. 6 guys loaded down with the Huey crew and everything. And not only were you straining its, but there was space was getting to a premium too. So the 20th SOS ships were a little bit bigger, and you could pack those things and they would take off no problem. So we could take 5 or 6 of those and put the entire CRP on the ground at one shot.
Jeez.
And they had special tactics. So they had their own controller, kind of like a cubby guy, right? And so he would be up high. They had their own gunships, which flew patterns, all right, special patterns. And they would drop down treetop level about 5, 6, 7 clicks out, right? Just based on whatever the controller told them. And he would vector them in. And I mean, they were going full, as fast as those choppers could go. They were going full speed in formation. And then they would come in and he was counting down, 1,000 yards, 500 yards, 300 yards, 200. And then he'd holler flare, and they'd come into the LZ and just go boom, like that, flare out, drop. Everybody's out, and they were boom, and they were gone. It was something to see.
Jeez, well, I've spoken to some of them that worked at CCS, and then they were exclusive there for a while until things started shutting down, and then went to CCN. But early FOB2, they worked, and I mean their mini gun, the gunships with the mini guns and the rockets. I mean, I see why the CCS guys loved them so much, because we're not having fixed air wing. Having those mini guns come in, I can only imagine the relief those boys felt.
We used some of them down in Halo school a couple times, and those things would be sitting on the ground and load up with jumpers, and then just go straight up. I mean, literally, they would just go straight up 10,000 feet, and then you jump.
They would you say
5,000.
Would you say, I mean, because you've got a pretty exclusive and we'll be getting into actually another exclusive group. Would you say they were probably one of the best aviation units in Vietnam?
Oh, they were really good. I mean, they were top notch. But then they had some of the best choppers in Vietnam.
And that's oh yeah, I mean, you got the Gladiators, the the Lancers up north, the Buccaneers. I mean, there's a lot of great units that supported.
I talked to one of the pilots one time, and I asked him, I said, how'd you end up here? And he said, when I got in country, he said, they brought us in for a briefing. And he said, the commander said, we have a special mission that we support, and we need some people who willing to fly for it. And he said, one of the guys raised their hand and said, what is it? And they said, well, you'll find that out if you volunteer.
Holy cow.
So, most of those guys were cowboys anyway. So, so
I,
he said,
I,
"Oh, well, that sounds interesting. I'll volunteer for that." So,
I was just fixing to say, I mean, most of the units that supported y'all, but it seems like the 20th SOS, when you get into, I've got their photo album, but more and more as the war went on, I mean, they started looking like SOG guys, the way they dressed, the weapons they carried, the tiger stripes they started wearing. I mean, it's interesting how much guys hang out with y'all. Y'all seem to rub off on them very quickly. Let's see.
they took care of us, so we tried to take care of them.
Absolutely, absolutely, and they always speak highly of y'all. And every time we have one of you guys on, y'all speak very highly of them. Let's see. I thought it'd be interesting because the next ones are pretty interesting, but this one will be a little more in depth. Could we speak about drawing an NKP mission from CCC and what all that would entail?
Well, any mission, I mean, that came up, it depended a lot on, who got assigned. It depended a lot on what the type of mission was and whether or not a team with that specific experience was available. For instance, wiretaps, for instance, okay. It depended on what teams were operational, and available versus, there were always teams in the field. So, if they were operational and ready to go, so the selection of a team came down to a number of things, right? As to how you got ready for it. I mean, every mission. Now, the only off the cuff missions were bright light missions because you had no time to plan, because by the nature of a bright light mission, it was an emergency, right? A team was in contact, or a helicopter was down, or a pilot was down, or something, and you had to respond right then. Okay, so there was little to no advanced planning for something like that. But every mission was one that was planned and thought about, and maps were gone over, and VRs were done, and then you had to do an op order in front of the commander and the S2, S3, sergeant major, the whole 9 yards. You had to present, your plan. It was whiteboarded, everything. And then, questions were asked, suggestions were made, and then you came out with a final plan. So NKP was not a lot different, except from where you were launched from and what your support was. So we got tasked with an NKP mission. Usually those were ones that were farther west in Laos, too far for the Hueys to go, right? And make it back. So they would launch from Thailand, and they were very secretive, not just but because the Thais didn't know we were doing it. Okay. So the way it would work is we'd load up the team, fly up to Da Nang with Blackbirds. They'd usually fly up, and I guess they refueled up there, and would load up, fly to NKP. When we'd get to NKP, they'd park out at the end of the runway, and they had these look like a big bread truck, all right, would back up to the ramp, and they'd open the back doors, and everybody would scurry off the plane, off the ramp, into the truck, right, into the van, and they'd close them. And in the van, they had front, like regular 2 seats in the front, right? Well, they had a big piece of plywood behind those seats going up, so nobody could see in from the front and see who was in the back of the van.
Wow.
So you'd you'd go to the NKP compound, and it had about I think it was around an 8-foot chain link fence all the way around the compound with barbed wire on top. And then you drive around to the back of the building, and it had a U shape at the back with a fence across. All right. It'd open the gates, you'd pull in, and you'd offload inside. All right. And they had sleeping quarters and food, everything was self-contained right there. So you never actually left the compound. Now the yards in particular had to stay. They could go outside, but they had to stay in that enclosed little yard. They couldn't go wandering. Now we could wander around a little bit because we were Americans, and they were, Americans were there. It was an American base, right? But the yards they were particularly sensitive about the yards being seen. And so anytime that you had to move, it was a whole secret kind of thing. And so depending on the mission, you could either launch, I think, either from NKP, although it was also very common to launch from Ubon or Udorn. All right. So there were 3 bases, and they were all up in northeast Thailand. In fact, my dad was stationed at those bases up there. He was in the Air Force, and he was up there at one time. But when you went in, the Air Force would give you a briefing. I remember I was very impressed because everybody in there was like a major or higher, that was in this briefing. And they had all of these high color pictures of the LZ. And I mean, we had black and whites when we went on VR. They had all these real high definition color photographs of the LZ, from the west, from the east, from the north, from the south, blah, blah, all over the place. And had highly detailed maps and all this kind of stuff. And of course, you were going in by Jolly Green Giants, and then they would surprise. The thing that really surprised me, they said, "So, what is your cutoff? How late will you beyond which you don't want to go on the ground?" This was like a light colonel. He's saying, when do you want to be on the ground? And I said, I don't want to be on the ground any later than 2 or 3 o'clock at the latest, absolute latest, right? I said, I want lots of daylight between when I get on the ground and, So he turned around and he said, okay. He says, that means if we can't be off by, I don't know what it was, 12 o'clock, mission's no go. I thought, wow, this is great. I love this place. They just, whatever you ask for, they say, okay, we'll do it that way. But I remember flying out, and the A1Es are right there with you, on either side of the Jolly Greens, flying right there. It was a very unique experience, very, very different from going in with, just like we normally did. Yeah. But the Air Force used to give us some pretty good support at times.
So the Jolly Greens would insert y'all, and y'all would continue on a presumably 5, 6, 7 day mission. And then would they be the same unit extracting you?
It would be the same people that extract you. Yeah, I mean, and it was a logistics thing. I mean, the Hueys just couldn't get out there. Yeah. I mean, the farthest I ever went from Vietnam side, Newman Ruff and I went in on a mission one time. This was prior to the Cambodian invasion. And there was Newman, me, and 2 Montagnards. And we went in to a division NVA division rear area, and to scope it out. And I remember the chopper during the briefing, they said, be sure you're not in contact when you call for extraction. They said, because we only have 15-minute station time.
Oh.
And they were launching from as close to the border as they could get. So we were way out there. And so we spent, I don't know, a week or more in there, sneaking around at night. We wore NVA bata boots, all right, and not jungle boots. And Ruff had brought a whole big sack. I forget how many, but like 30 plus little toe popper landmines. And so all night long, we'd be out planting them in trails and storage areas and everything. We heard every one of them go off before we left.
Holy crap. Wow.
And they knew we were in there, but they couldn't find us. They were looking for us all over the place, but because we were wearing the bata boots, anytime they came across tracks, it looked just like the tracks they left. So, and one time we were laying probably, I don't know, 30 feet off a trail maybe. And there were a bunch of NVA standing around on the trail and talking about us, wondering where we were. And so Covey came over, and Covey was flying over and then cutting his engine, and then start up and then cut his engine. So, which was a signal that they wanted us to call, right? And because we hadn't contacted them. And they kept, and so now the NBA standing and watching this, and now they're starting to talk about, well, why are they doing that? You know,
what's going on here?
So now I was supposedly, I trained as a radio operator originally in SF, right? The only time I ever used Morse code the entire time I was in there was then. And I took our emergency radios that we carried, which had a little button and I sent out more in Morse code. I kept saying, "Covey, go away, Covey, go away." And one of the guys at Leghorn told me about it later. He said he was sitting there with his feet kicked up on the desk, and he heard this stuff coming across. He said, all of a sudden he realizes, geez, that's Morse code. And he started taking it down, and he called the Covey, and he said, go away. They can't talk to you, right? You got to get out of there. And all of a sudden the Covey went, and he flew off,
Holy moly.
And that was the only time I used Morse code in my Army career.
Wow. Thank goodness you were proficient enough and it worked well enough to get him out of there like that. Oh my God. I guess we can kind of do from start to bottom here with our questions, and they're to close out. There'll be I think we've got 2 or 3 from the viewers at the moment, but question was, how much did you guys think about each mission on its merits, or did you take a lot of lessons learned and make decisions based on the prior experiences, good or bad?
Well, like I said, every mission was well thought out. Mm-hmm. So, all right, take one that we did one time, a wiretap. Well, they had located a coaxial cable running along a ridge line along a high-speed trail. So they wanted us to go in and tap it and then record what came across, right? We figured, what the heck, it's a high-speed trail. People come along, we'll try and grab a POW too. It's, if the opportunity presents itself. So we studied maps of the area, of the ridge line, the likely approach that we would take. Yeah, I mean, you detailed it out to the nth degree as much as you could. I mean, you went in, there were always a lot of unknowns. All right. You always, now, one advantage you had, or at times had, it got harder and harder, but it was like a burglar in your house, right? You don't expect to find a burglar in your house, but the burglar is always ready to run into you, right? So we were kind of like the burglars running around. We knew we were going to run into them sooner or later if we stayed in long enough. And so that gave us a slight edge, but very slight. So yeah, no, there was an enormous amount of planning and thought that went into every mission. Even if it was just an area recon. All right. But probably one of the most complex missions is a POW.
Oh.
All right. And because now you're trying to grab a guy, he may be wounded, you've got to now get him out, and he's not just coming along for the ride, for fun. So I saw one POW, they had to lash him literally to the rings and the floor of the helicopter because he was trying to jump out. So there were things like they used to tell them, and then their own people told us this. They used to tell them horrible stories about the things that we would do to them if they were captured. So there have been instances where you had the drop on them and said, "Give up," and they went for their weapon, clearly knowing that you
had them. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we'd do a lot of times was put the Montagnards out first, so they didn't see the American until after the fact. But I mean, POWs were actually treated really, really well. I remember one that got caught. I think that was the one that showed Bob Howard carrying the guy down from the helicopter pad. Took him down to the medic shack. He stripped his uniform, gave him a hot shower, which is probably first one he'd had in God knows how long. Checked him out medically, gave him treated any bumps or bangs or bruises or whatever he might have, checked him medically, gave him medicine if he needed it, right? And then we had this locked room under the talk. And I remember me and might have been Pat Lucas. I'm not sure. Anyway, we took it down a tray of food for him, hot meal, couple of Cokes, a pack of cigarettes. He had a cot and blankets and a pillow. I mean, this guy, you couldn't shut him up.
Wow.
I mean, he was just a regular soldier, but the political guys were a little different. They were a little tougher, but
yeah. I can only imagine what he was. Must have thought he'd have hit the jackpot, actually sleeping on something other than the cold hard ground and eating food and taking a hot shower. I can imagine that was mind blowing for him.
But going back to the original question, missions were meticulously planned out. We used to do what we called a war room meeting, right? So we'd call the team, or at least all the team that was going on the mission together, and we'd sit down. Now, we never gave the Montagnards maps initially, maybe later after you're in the field, but you never gave them maps of the AO before you went in. All right. And that was just but we'd sit down and we'd talk about the missions and how we planned on conducting it. How, we could look at a map, but it didn't have any references on it, and say, okay, so we're going to do this, and we're going to go like this, and we'll go down up this ridge line or whatever. And then we'd ask questions. All right. Say, okay, suppose I'm killed. What happens? What are you going to do? What do you need to do? And who needs to do it? Right? Suppose all the Americans are killed. What are you going to do? How are you? And so we went over all of those scenarios and tried to plan as best we could for everything we could think of. I remember at the end of one of those, everybody was leaving, and this new guy, young guy who had only been there briefly, and this was his first mission. And he came back to me. He said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "When I ask you something," he said, that was cold. He said, "That was one of the coldest things I've ever seen." I actually didn't understand what he said. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you were talking like people were going to be killed right to their face. You were saying, well, what if you're killed, or what if this guy is killed, or what if this guy is killed? Who takes over? Who does what?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I did, because we need to plan for those things." And I said, 30 seconds after you walk out that door, you may be dead, and you better get used to the idea. And I said, if you can't get used to that and put it behind you, then you need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, this ain't the place for you.
So it was a very, and if you knew somebody who had done something before or had some knowledge of the area that you were going in, you'd go to them, and if they were around, you'd say, "Hey, come on, I need to ask you a couple of questions." So yeah,
we've heard of
haphazard wasn't a good thing. It sometimes turned out that way, but
And I mean, y'all had target folders of teams that had been in the area previously that y'all could go and look through and all of that. So I mean, y'all definitely made sure y'all were on y'all's P's and Q's and ready for action.
Oh yeah, you had to. I mean, this was not something you went out and just did,
lollygagging around.
This was the serious stuff,
Yes.
I mean, the one time they sent us to an area. This was Texas, and they said there hadn't been anything in there forever, dead area, dry hole. But they said nobody's been in there for a while, so we'd like you to just go in and take a look around, So we thought, well, hey, what the hey, we'll take everybody. It's like a big day out, right? We'll take everybody. So there was me, Ron Maddox, 1-1. Don Green was the radio operator, and Woody, Woody, big blonde buff kid.
Phil Woods, maybe.
May have been. And so he and Ron Maddox both had RPDs. And then we had 2 M79 guys, and the rest of us were car 15s, whatnot. So altogether, there was about 10 of us, all right, 10 or 11 of us, I forget exactly. So in we go. Within 50 yards of hitting there we go. Oh, that's Bill Spurden there, and Ron on the far right, me in the middle, and Don on the left, yep. So within 50 yards of coming off the LZ, the point man says, "Look," and he said, "Runner." So they obviously had an LZ watcher on the LZ. And so I said, "Okay." And we headed on down, and we came to this dried up stream bed, kind of a gully, and we're walking down it. And off to the right, we see some old lean-tos. So so we said, let's check it out. So we went up, and sure enough, there's a bunch of lean-tos, all right, scattered around and everything, but they didn't look like they'd been used any time recently. So I looked up and I said, "Oh, look! It looks like a trail over there. You could see like a through the jungle. It was like a thin, you know how you see something in the distance, and it's kind of like a thin ribbon. It looks like so." And then as I walked closer, it got bigger. As I got close, turns out it was a road, hard packed, had curbs on either side, you know, like that, probably 6 inches. Looked up, it was all overhead camouflage netting.
Oh.
I mean, you know, this was a serious engineering piece of work. So about that time, you know, so I'm taking pictures all over the place. And about that time, we hear all this commotion, people coming, I think. And a large group of people carrying live food, chickens and whatnot, we could hear. So we shoot over the, you know, there's a big brush screen, and we jump back there. And around the corner comes an NVA point group, about 8 men in the point team. And I mean, these guys were, I mean, sharp NVA uniforms and pith helmets. They had the works, chest packs, AKs. Right. So they came into the open area where the lean-tos were. And I'd said to everybody, I said, nobody shoot, nobody fire until I fire, right? And so they're kind of looking around. And so they turned as though they were leaving. And one guy went from safe to full auto with his AK, which was his final action. And so anyway, long story short, we wiped the point element out and then hosed down the people coming with gas and HE and a bunch of stuff, right? And took off. Well, Don Green, as we were withdrawing, twisted his ankle really bad and he could barely go, right? So I took the radio from him and we took off. We contacted, as it happens, John Plaster, this was his first Covey mission. Right? So he took us through we said, well, we made a big contact, you know, and a big party of people. Got one guy who's injured, and so they said, well, we'll call an extract. So we said, fine. He said, I'll direct you to an LZ. And he sent us through this bamboo, and I mean, it was hell on earth getting through this stuff. And we finally got there and got out. And we got back, we debriefed, everything was fine. We were still debriefing, and people came in, they said, you said there was this stuff in a road and all this other stuff, and you took photos of them. I said, yeah. And they said, well, none of your pictures came out. I said, well, that's on you. I said, you guys set the settings on the camera. I just pull it out and push the button. I mean, I used to carry it up here and I just pull it out and bang, 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 bang. I never messed with the settings or anything on those Pen EEs. I guess it's possible something could have, but we hadn't been there. We hadn't been out there. I mean, this was the first day we were there. We didn't even stay overnight. And so anyway, long story short, they didn't believe us. They thought we just made it all up. Jesus. So we were really PO'd about it. So anyway, I don't know, probably 2 days, a day and a half, went by, and a lieutenant from one of the hatchet forces came by, and he said, hey, you went into this area, didn't you, a few days ago? And I said, yeah. He said, you show me where you went? And I said, sure. Showed him where we went in. I showed him. He said, where was this stuff you found? And I told him. I said, why? He said, well, we're going to go in there and take a look around with a hatchet force. I said, okay. I said, that I would recommend that you don't use the LZ that we use, though. You use something different, right? And I said, even better, I'll tell you what. I said, if you like, I'll pick some of my guys and my point man, and we'll go in as your lead, you know, and your recon lead, and we'll take you there. And he said, oh, we don't need your help. So I said, okay, that's fine. So I think they took a reinforced platoon or something in. And the next mistake was, well, number one, the first mistake was they used the LZ we used. Second mistake was they went in late in the day. God. And so they hadn't even gotten to where we had found the stuff. They kind of landed, it was late in the day, and they RON'd, right? And they got hit that night and took something like 85% casualties. So then they believed us.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm sure that was the first thought, saying, well, I guess we misjudged RT Texas's intel
But
at the cost of.
That wasn't that unusual. I mean, I understand, you know, there were no pictures, but there were numerous instances where recon teams would go out. Long Bay was one instance where teams said they had found tank tracks, and people said, you can't get tanks up there. You know, before the 71 or whenever that offensive was, we found tank tracks again. They said, oh, no, there's no reported tanks out there. I mean, there were numerous instances where we would report things, and, you know, the people down in Saigon would poo-poo and say, oh, no. We have no reports on that. Well, what are we doing then? You know,
I mean, the audacity for that's always been one thing that reading in these books where they just say, no, it's not possible. I mean, even seeing elephants, I think, used as porters and all that, they were like, no, that's not possible. They're not. It's like, I mean, come on. I think one guy ended up bringing an elephant turd into the office and dumping it. But I mean, jeez.
Yeah, I often, I mean, we talked about it a lot. I mean, what was the point of sending us out there if you're not going to believe what we tell you when we come back? You know, so, but that was early days for special ops. So
yeah. But
we did. I mean, truth is, you had a lot of guys that were assessing intel back at the headquarters that didn't understand
what was going on the ground.
Right. And you know, these days you have people who understand what's going on back at here, you know, making assessments and decisions. So it's a little different.
Yeah, that's a giant understatement. We on the next question we had, we do have a picture for the latter part of it, but this is dealing with ammo. The first part of it was, how did they decide how much ammo to carry? Was it mission appropriate or mission dependent, I guess they meant, or was it always as many mags as they could carry? And then the second part to that was what we spoke of offline, the taping of mags and having two mags on, like a jungle mag that you had in your picture.
So what a team carried was teams were different, you know, and some carry, you know, you look at Joe Walker and Ed Wokoff, all right, they were heavy teams. They went in looking for a fight, right? I mean, Joe Walker would go in with 15, 17, 18 guys, right? Ed Wokoff, not much different. They carried knee mortars and RPGs and, you know, everything under the sun. All right. But I mean, the truth of the matter, you know, I remember, what was his name? I don't know. He was there for months before he ever got a CIB, because he was really good at sneaking around, right?
Wow.
And his team was they went a long time without, they found stuff, they reported on stuff, but they didn't get caught, right? Which was rarer and rarer as time went on. But I mean, truth of the matter is the bottom line mission was special reconnaissance, to go out and find out what was going on and come back and report on it. All right. And you can't do that if you're dead, right? So, but you also had to recognize that you were out there at the end of the line, and it was going to be a while before somebody got there to help you out. So it was a kind of a balance, all right, between how much can I reasonably carry, along with my food and water and all the other paraphernalia, right? So how much can I reasonably carry and still be, mobile and nimble and get around? So on my team, we carried 15. Well, this was when it was pretty much only 20 round magazines. So you carried a minimum of 15 magazines. That was pretty much the minimum. Okay. You carried 6 frag grenades, 2 Willie Peters, 2 smoke grenades, 2 bars of C4, and 1 Claymore. Everybody carried that. Then on top of that, you carried your food and, sleeping gear and socks and, all the other odds and ends stuff, right? The exception to that was my radio operator. I always believed that the radio operator should carry all the radio gear. All right. It's no good if if he needs a new battery that it's on the body of the guy, over there. You know what I mean? So I always said, if you're the radio operator, you carry all the radio gear, so where it is. You're not looking for it when you need it. So I would always give the radio operators the option of carrying a shotgun with a couple of bandoliers of mixed ammo, as opposed to a car 15 and all the magazines and everything else, because it was a much lighter load, weapons wise. But it was a pretty effective load because we had shotgun shells that had CS gas, flechettes, ball ammo. I mean, they had a whole mixture of stuff. And having a pump shotgun start firing off that kind of stuff in the middle of a fight, kind of, people would go, what was that? But that was our SOP. Other teams had a different one. When I took RT Wyoming out, they were used to going out very lightly armed. All right. And I told them, I said, well, that changes, because I said, here's what you're going to carry when you go out with me. So I gave them the SOP, and they were, and they were moaning and whining and crying. And I said, and I'm going to check, before you go. Right. So we'll have a weapons check and everything, and make sure you're carrying what you're supposed to be. Well, we got in a huge firefight. The other American got wounded. We got pinned down on a hilltop. We couldn't raise anybody on radio. We were surrounded. And when we finally did raise somebody on radio, it actually was Larry White.
6-pack.
Yeah. And he happened to have a flight of A1Es. He had found some target of opportunity. So he had this flight of A1Es on his wingtip. And he said, oh, okay. So they were coming in, and some fast movers came, and they were dropping some bombs danger close. And we had one white phosphorus grenade go off in the perimeter, and unbelievably, nobody got touched. And I mean, things were were kind of hairy. But anyway, the NBA backed off, and we ended up coming out on strings. But when we got back to the compound, the point being is all the yards came up to me, and nobody came back with any extra ammo. And they were saying, thank you, because if they had carried what they usually did, they'd all been dead probably.
Holy cow. Wow. Yeah, I can imagine they were thanking their lucky stars that you changed up the team SOP. The part two, the photo of the taped up magazine, could you tell us a little bit about that and why you guys quit doing that, or why you specifically quit?
We tried. I mean, we were always trying different things. I'm sure you've seen pictures of guys with the forward handles on their car, and side handles, and we were always trying different things. One time, I took a car 15, and I took the flash suppressor off it and put an M16 flash suppressor and an M16 stock, and I could fire rifle grenades. So we were, it was just a different configuration of stuff. So that a lot of guys tried taping 30-round magazines back to back, and the idea is it seems good in that you run out, you hit the release and flip it and shove it back in. The problem is you got 60 rounds of ammo and 2 magazines there, and that's putting a lot of weight on the rifle. And a lot of times what could happen, didn't ever happen to me, but you could get a malfunction, all right, in the feeding and with the receiver. So tried it, but a lot of us stopped using it because of problems that we had. So I mean, we were constantly modifying our weapons. I mean, my safety, for instance. Well, there's one. See, with the handle up to front, and we always had the slings that we made out of the nylon webbing and stuff. And I cut down my safety so that it carried it on safe, but I could give it a hit with my thumb and it would spin to full auto. It skipped single and went right straight to full auto. But so you were constantly trying different things. I think we had some of the first red dots around, which were pretty primitive at the time. Well, they used to send us odd stuff to experiment with sometimes. We had some very early red dots. MAC 10s.
Mm-hmm.
You ever heard of the MAC 10s? They came in, what was it? They came in 45, 9mm, and something else. But they came and demonstrated them, and we had a couple. We said, "Dave, these things are great." We were thinking of them as, because they had a shoulder holster, secondary weapons and everything like that. And then for some reason, the Army wouldn't buy them. So.
Oh man. Did you ever use any of the early red dots, or did you steer?
I used a couple, yeah, once or twice. I never used it in a firefight, but tried it out at the range.
Seems like you'd be too close to be using any scopes or any sights like that across the fence.
Yeah, I mean, you could see who you were shooting at sometimes. I mean, jungle depended on the type of jungle you were in. Sometimes it could be pretty open. Sometimes you were firing at muzzle flashes. One time I got on the line tap. Newman Ruff and I went. I'll tell you a funny story. I was a radio operator. So we set up and put out security. And the security had kind of not string, it was heavier than string, but it ran back to me, and I had it attached to my foot. so they could give it a tug. If they saw something, they'd give you a tug and let you know something was coming down the trail. As I said, Russ said, well, we're going to be by this trail anyway. We'll see if we can catch a POW, right? And so the Ruff is out there, and he's sticking the prongs into this coax cable. And then Ruff had this love affair with toe poppers. So he was going to bury a toe popper in the trail. And suddenly the Montagnard interpreter behind me taps me on the shoulder, and he says, they know we're here. And I said, yeah, I'm sure they know we're in the area. He says, no, they know we're here. He said, they say, you send out a reaction force for your side, and we'll send out one from our side, and we'll catch them in the middle. And so I said, so I'm saying, Ruff, hey, Ruff, I'm trying to call him. And he's like looking up. I'm saying, and about that time, my foot goes, boom, jerks out to one side. And I mean, seconds after my foot was pulled out, claymores start going off. I mean, we were much closer to a headquarters of some sort than we had realized. And I looked up, and I'm trying to get untangled and get my stuff all back together, right? Because I've taken off the radio, and it's sitting in my pack off to the side. And people are stuff's the claymores are going off, people are shooting. So I look up, and I see this line of NVA infantry coming along, right? And I look around, and everybody's gone. I'm sitting there behind this big bush, right? And I look over, so I look over to my left, and all Ruff and all the rest of the team are over here behind cover, right, shooting back at, and the NVA are over on the right side coming, and I'm sitting out here in the middle. So, and I'm down hiding under this bush trying to get the radio on, And so I look over there, and they go, Ruff goes, okay. He says, on three. So I get ready, and they go 1, 2, 3, and they all jump like start shooting, and I jump up and I run and I dive over a log. And a B-40 exploded on the other side of a tree from me. But I mean, we got into quite a do, and we ran for a couple days on that one. But
holy God. How speaking of some of the endage, one of the question was when I don't know if you recruited any of your teammates, but with recruiting endage team members, did he know what their strength and weaknesses were from the different tribes and nationalities?
Well, I mean, in the Central Highlands, in the South, the most common were Rod Day, around bound me to it. In the Central Highlands, the largest groups were the Jirai and the Banar. The biggest Montagnard group of all was the Banar. Farther north, you found more Brew. So to some degree, it depended geographically on where you were. As to what tribes might be, the Sedang were a little farther north, but I mean, there were 33 distinct Montagnard dialects. And so, but you didn't say, oh, well, I want to hire Jirai guys because they're the meanest or something. I mean, most of the guys that came, I mean, you tended to, the guys on a team would tend to be largely from a group, but I mean, there'd be others scattered in. And the thing is that these guys would generally start off in, the Rough Puff or the CIDG, right, out in the A camps. And then they would work their way up to the Mike Force, and And then by the time they got to us, they were seasoned. They had a lot of time on the ground. They knew their business. And most of the time they would come with recommendations from one of the guy on the team, right? Somebody they knew. So, I mean, like our 01 was a dry. Most of the guys were dry, but I had a Rade guy that showed up looking for a job, and the guys brought him in and recommended him. Turned out he was a full row commander later on. A big fella. He was one of the only Montagnards I ever ran into that could look at basically on an eye to eye level. Wow. I'm 6'3", and he was a big fella, and we had to kind of sort out who was running things, but because like I said, he was a full row commander. I don't know. That looks like
there's a law right there, actually. I think.
Yeah, it looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah. Some teams carried them. I didn't like them. I didn't like
RPD right there as well.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, see, now there's a good. See, you see that picture. See the rucksacks. Say you'd get up. You'd get to if you were going on ladders, you'd run up to the thing, hook your rucksack onto the ladder, climb up 3 or 4 rungs, and then take another snap link and hook yourself in. Right. Very rarely did anybody ever climb all the way up the ladders into the chopper.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories of guys doing it their first time, thinking they needed to climb all the way up, and were like, "Nope, I'm not making this," and would learn to snap in.
Yeah, I mean, part of our team PT over at the rappelling tower, on one side of the rappelling tower, we had ladders like that.
Mm-hmm.
So part of our PT was to climb that ladder for time. All right, to get used to the idea of climbing the ladders. All right, and then rappel down. But in reality, very few people climb the ladders, because they're swinging, the choppers hovering, and
jeez, and especially with a full load. Yeah, that's crazy.
That looks like Ron Maddox right there.
I believe it is labeled Mr. Ron with his RPD and
RPD. It looks like his hair.
That's crazy.
But strings were dicey. I mean, that one where I was talking about Wyoming, we came out on strings because the only place they could find was a hole in the canopy. So they hovered over that and then dropped the strings through the canopy.
Man, oh man!
That one was somebody had cut the strings wrong, and when the chopper lifted up, and I looked, it's funny, I looked around and the yards were gone, and I looked up and they were about 8 foot above me. Before my, tautened up and I started going up. So the entire ride back, the whole idea with strings was they were cut similar length so you could hold on to one another and keep you from swinging around and flapping around. So they were fine, right? They were above me, and I was down there flapping around like old laundry in the breeze, and my rifle on the sling kept slapping me in the face, and I'd hold the strings and hold them apart to stop me from. But then you kind of go like, and man, I was cursing that pilot something fierce, and because he was going really fast, and when I landed, I was really mad. Turned out the ship was all shot up. That's why they were going so fast.
Oh,
and I started out heading over to punch him out, and then when I heard that, I got over there and I told him thanks for getting us back safely.
Whew. Wow. We've seen in a bunch of the photos, and especially in the later years, what some of the next questions are dealing with gear setup. But did you or any of your team? We've seen the RPDs, but did y'all use any foreign gear, AK chest, the Chicom chest rigs, RPDs, NVA uniforms, or the like?
We did not use them as a matter of course. Now, some teams ran, like Ron Knight's team, they ran all NVA. So they wore the AKs, chest packs, pith helmet, the whole 9 yards, right? Except for Ron Knight, you know, he's about as tall as me. So he'd be surrounded by all these guys and then he'd be standing about.
That's one big NVA.
But Newman, Ruff and I came up one time with, this was Halo oriented, and we were trying to figure out a better way, equipment wise, for Halo jumping, and we ended up with Israeli Uzis and NVA chest packs, and the reason, and then we cut down Indige rucksacks, and the idea being getting everything a little more compact and tight for Halo jumping, so you weren't so bulky and flop, you had more control. And so what we did was the Uzis, which had collapsible stocks, were tied down to the reserve chute, all right, with a magazine in. As Uzis are blowback, so you could land and just hit that thing and be ready to go, right? And an NVA chest pack, there you go. You could carry 9 mags in an NVA chest pack, all right? And it worked out pretty well. So that's exactly the setup that we came up with. He and I came up with. And that mission, we were practicing, and I got injured, and Moye, who was on Texas, ended up going.
Oh man, ended up getting injured for the combat Halo jump. And you got injured during training. When that,
long gone.
Jeez Louise.
But the gear and the setups that they were all carrying is what Ruff and I came up with.
That's really, really cool. I was interested and curious where the Uzis came into things. I mean, I know having smaller and all of that would help out, but who in particular? And very interesting, you and Mr. Newman did that. And this is dealing with your cross-border setup. How did you set up your cross-border gear? You had mentioned the canteen and BAR belt for your magazines and such. How did you set up your cross-border gear?
You mean how? Well, magazines, when I had the BAR belts, all the magazines were on my left side. I had 2 canteens in the back. White phosphorus were in between the canteens to cushion them on either side. And I had an aid pack 10 kit on the right side. I had a pouch with some grenades in it, I think, on the right side. Then I had radio gear up here and a knife up here, and I don't know, different maps in here and stuff and all over the place. But it didn't change. I mean, once you got your setup pretty much, I mean, it was a rare thing. I didn't change weapons going to the field, right? I carried a Car 15. That's what I carried. All right. Now I might carry something else in addition, but that's what I carried. And so my gear setup didn't change a whole lot, because once you got it set, keep in mind, you're carrying a lot of weight. All right. So once you got it set, I had it sewn in so it didn't shift, right? it stayed the way it was. The stabo rig and the belt and everything were basically sewn together, so it didn't shift around. All right. And so, yeah, I didn't, you know, I didn't, that was my setup. And most guys were like that. They got something that was comfortable, and the weight was well distributed, and it worked well for them, depending on what weapons they carried, you know, RPD or AK or whatever it might be. And you pretty much kept it that way because that fit, you know, and you could fight with it that way, right? So you didn't change it up every mission.
Yeah, that's one thing that you come to find out amongst you guys, that once something works well and, like you said, you get comfortable with it, there's no sense in fixing something that's working.
Yeah. I mean, you know, if somebody came up or something new came in or some came up with a better thing, sure, you know, you'd say, oh, well, okay, hey, you know, I'm not going to say no because
I'm setting my ways.
Yeah. You know, you're willing to look at something different, but unless it was better, you know, I wasn't going to change just for the sake of changing.
No. We mentioned size of teams earlier, but with your teams, I know Mr. Newman liked to go with a very few amount of guys, but when you were running teams, what did you prefer the size of the team, more or less?
I tried to get somewhere in the middle. I mean, I've run with as few as 4 people. All right, 2 Americans and 2 Montagnards, and of course the CRP had upwards of 50, between 50 and 60. You know, so I've been in a lot in between. But I'd say in Recon, on average, it was probably about 8.
Wow. That's that's bridging the gap between heavy and super light, that 4, 6,
Well,
what
because
have you.
I think, you know, if you had a 1-0, a 1-1, and an RTL radio operator, so that's 3 Americans. Point man, 2 M79 gunners, and another guy. You're say you're 0-1. So, you know, and maybe one other, you know, so 7 or 8, right? So three Americans and 4 to 5 yards.
And the mix up and all of that, people are always interested. The weapon makeup, is all of the indige going to be CAR 15 usage or RPD use?
So point man always had a CAR 15. He was always number 1. I was always number 2 in line. So we both carried CAR 15s. Usually there would probably be an M79 gunner behind me. So you had 2 CAR 15s and M79 gunner right in front in the event of contact, right? Bang, 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 bang. So in the middle would be the RTO, wherever that fell. All right. 1-1 was always he was always at the tail gun position, and then the other yards. So they were kind of sprinkled in and out. So in our case, Ron Maddox was the 1-1. He carried the RPD. Like I said, we usually had 2 M79 gunners with a broad mix of different ammo. Now, the M79 gunners, their vests, those vests that you saw, those would carry about 24 rounds. But they would usually, a lot of them would carry some extra rounds or different rounds in a canteen holder, you know, 1 or 2. So they had extras. So they would usually be carrying maybe 30 or more M40 rounds. So, and when they came out with the XMs, and some of us would add an XM, onto. But now you're getting into adding a lot more weight, because not only do you have your Car 15 magazine, now you're adding
40 millimeter.
Right. So you had to kind of balance, is that worth it? Is, am I benefiting myself, or am I just weighing myself down?
Yeah.
So,
I didn't
but
even
7
think
or 8
about
was our general kind of range.
sweet spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was also not a bad size for helicopters too, for Hueys.
I didn't even think about having a heavy team and multiple helicopters having to come in and get y'all out. That could be a booger as well. I didn't even think about that.
One time, now here can be a problem. One time we had, I don't know, we had some extra guys. I don't remember, but how many, but we had to, and maybe 2, you were in the mountains. So sometimes, because of the elevation, those choppers wouldn't lift well, right? But for whatever reason, we had to split into 2 choppers, right? So we're going around, how they come in, and you got the Covey and they got the choppers, and everybody's flying around all, and all of a sudden the door gunner leaned over to me, and so I'm in the chopper, and the radio's in the chopper with me. Mm-hmm. So my chopper was supposed to be the first on the ground, all right, because they were going to have to go in one at a time. We didn't have an LZ big enough for 2. So he leans over and he says, "Hey," he said, "the pilot just told me," he said, "your other ship's on the ground. They've already gone in." I said, "What do you mean they've already gone in?" He said, somehow they got in first. And I said, "They don't have a radio or anything. They can't be on the ground."
Oh, Lord.
So, I mean, I was really upset. And the pilot said to me, he said, "What do you want to do?" He said, "I don't care." I said, "Abort, get them out." I said, "By the time, we get in, and now everybody within 25 clicks knows we're here."
Oh, gosh. Boy, that's a nightmare right there on the insert, the non-radio 10, not on the field first.
And we got back, and Ron Maddox said to me, he said, "We got on the ground and we're looking around, going, where's John Good? Where'd he go? Where's John Good?" I'm up in the air flying
I was about to say he ain't here yet. Our last two questions of the day are dealing with what we spoke about earlier, the Halo side of things, and I'll double them up here. It was what was it like, and how were you picked for RT Storter or the Halo operation, and what was it like, the Halo school and the preparation for the Halo operation?
Well, Halo school was down in Long Con, and had Melvin, I can't think what's his last name, but
Melvin Hill.
Yeah, he had a couple of instructors. He was one, and it was like going to jump school in some ways. But I mean, you did some practice jumps, put a lot of emphasis on learning to fold your chutes, because in Halo you fold your own chutes, or at least you did then. All right. And I'm sure back on stateside they had riggers who did it, but we folded our own. All right. So you spent a lot of time learning how to fold the chute and do it right, and because if you screwed up, it was on you, right? And the first jump we made was out of a C-130, 10,000 feet. That was the first jump. And there were 4. They took 4 students, and then behind us were 2 instructors, right, like that. Anyway, so the tailgate on the 130 went down, and they said, "Okay, walk out to the end of the tailgate and look up," because how the C-130, the tail goes up, right? Well, there are red-green lights up there in that tail. And they said, "Keep an eye on the lights." When they go green, just take a step forward and turn, right? Simple. So, okay. And, we'd spent time on the tables. They didn't have the fancy air stuff where you could get to float around. So we spent time on the tables doing all the, positions and everything. And so we're standing there and they said, don't look down. So you're standing there.
Oh,
your toes right on the edge of the thing. And I'm standing there and I thought, So I kind of said, well, that's not what I said. I said, holy crap. And about that time, the instructors went boom, like that, shoved all four of us out the door.
Holy cow.
And we were flipping and flopping, until you suddenly got stable. And then you kind of were like, hey, this is pretty cool. I turn around. Oh, wow. Look at that. This is like, I'm flying, man. It was great. And I took my whole team, the entire Montagnard, the whole lot. Now, one of the things we did was go to Okinawa because they had the barometric pressure chambers over in Okinawa. We didn't have any in Vietnam. So we went over there and did all the pressure testing over there, and which was interesting because you're sitting there and everybody has oxygen masks, and then they tell you to take the mask off because what they do is they run the pressure so that it seems like you're up high, right? And like 30,000 feet or something. And you take the mask off and you have a little slate and chalk, and they tell you to write something, and you're writing stuff, makes perfect sense to you. They get the mask back on you, and it's like a bunch of gobbledygook.
Oh my gosh.
So we went through all of that. And we had while we were there, we had one incident. There was some others Vietnamese going through, and I remember I was on the ground rolling up my chute, and heard the chutes open and looked up, and there was this one guy that kept falling, right? And so my first thought was he was an instructor, because a lot of times they'd fall lower. And then I noticed another guy was in a delta position, and he's tracking across the sky to this guy, and they're going like this. And he couldn't get there, and so he opened, and this guy just went, and he hit the ground about 50 feet from me there were some bushes there, and he hit this road on the other side, dirt road. Now, I mean, this huge thing, a cloud of dust went up. And yeah, and they came out and with the ambulance, and they picked him up, and they had two stretchers, one on the bottom and one on top, and they were able to hold them together like that, take him away. But apparently, there's a bit of a to-do about it, but they figured what happened. Apparently because we had these barometric devices that would at a certain point fire and pull a pin and open your chute, right? In the event that you didn't open, or because we had some stuff, and you were supposed to open at certain heights, and so this was a safeguard, right? So they thought maybe it was faulty. Well, they looked at his equipment. Turns out that his device had fired, and you could see that it had partially pulled the pin, but it didn't pull it all the way out. It had gotten kinked somehow. So the way he didn't put it in correctly, basically, and it got kinked and didn't open. And they think what happened was he had been spinning, and he probably blacked out.
Mm-hmm.
So
God.
things happen.
Yeah, that's a dangerous profession there. That is terrible. And did you end up sadly getting injured at Longton or while y'all were in Okinawa?
Yeah, I got injured there while we were doing some jumps training for, and what happened was we probably shouldn't even been jumping, but it was very, very windy, and we went up and went out, and of course, I don't know, at Longton, there was our compound, but there were some other compounds around. There was an airstrip, some other compounds around the area. So Moya and I were actually together, close together, and we were coming down, and we were outside this compound in kind of their no man's land area, right? So we're coming down, and I see this big log laying across, and I'm thinking, I'm going to hit that log. So I'm jerking around. And I missed the log, but on the other side of the log was this bomb crater. And as I went over it, I thought I was going to go over the bomb crater and land. What happened was I came over the bomb crater and my boots clipped the edge. Okay. But what it did was when that happened, it's, and I was going at good speed, all right, because of the wind. I already knew I was going to have a hard landing, right? And it picked me up like that, and then boom, slammed me on the ground. But I was trying to get the quick releases off, and it was the chute was so tight they wouldn't unsnap. So it picked me up again and slammed me down again. It did that 3 times before I was able to get the snap loose. And of course, we were wearing full equipment and everything, and it's slamming me, bam, bam, with all the equipment and everything. So I'm laying there, and I'm thinking, oh man, that didn't feel good. And so Moya landed, I don't know, 30 feet away from me. He hollers over. He says, "Hey, John." I said, "What?" He says, "You okay?" And I said, "I'm not sure." He said, "Okay." He said, "I'm coming over in a minute. I'll be there in a minute." And he was banged up. He comes limping over, And so I said, "Okay, let's get the gear off first." So we took everything off, and he helped me stand up. And I was standing with all my weight pretty much on my left leg, because when I was being slammed, it was all on the right side. So I thought, I said to him, "Well, that doesn't feel too bad." And I went to take a step, and I just fell on my face. And I was like, ah.
Yeah.
So they came and picked me up, and they thought I had broken my pelvis, was their original. They took me into the emergency room at Long Bend and put me on the table, which is kind of funny. And they put me on a table, and they brought these scissors out, and they said, "Okay, this is going to hurt a little. We're going to cut your boots off." And I said, "No, you can't cut my boots off. Those are new boots." And I have a hard time getting boots. I said, "Take them off." And he said, "Oh, well, it's going to hurt." I said, "I don't care. Take them off." And so they took the boots off and then put them aside. Anyway, they're running in and out and taking x-rays. And some guy comes running in. He says, I got something. I said, "Where is that?" And he said, "That's your right hip." I said, "Oh, that's okay. That's shrapnel." He said, "Oh, okay." So it turns out it was all, nothing was broken, but all the muscles and everything in the abdomen and the right groin and my hip and upper thigh were all torn up. So they stuck me in a bed, and they came around and they said, "What hospital would you like to be medevaced to?" And I said, "Medevac? What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, yeah, you're going to, medevac." And I had some guy down in the ward laying in bed with this thing, and some mechanic had busted his finger, and got him up like that. And they were medevacing everybody. I said, I don't want to be medevac.
No.
They said, no, you got to be medevac. So I gave them, I forget what it was. I gave them the name of this field hospital, and they're going down this list. And I said, oh, we don't see that one. Where is it? And I said, Bangkok. They said, well, you can't go there. I said, well, then, I don't know. So anyway, I said, this ward sergeant comes by, and I said, where's the latrine? He said, you're in bed rest. He said, well, tell somebody to get you bedpan. I said, I'm not doing that. So some kid 2 beds down had crutches. So I said to the fellow next to me, I said, get those crutches for me. I'll get in trouble. I said, tell him I forced you. Tell him I made you give them to me. So they passed them down. And I go into the latrine. So I'm standing at the urinal. I'm propped up, and I got my head on the wall, kind of leaning. The sergeant comes in. He said, what do you think you're doing? I said, what's it look like I'm doing?
Trying to piss.
So anyway, I was not a very good patient, but I got my hands on a wheelchair. So I'm really so I was wheeling around the corridors in this hospital, and I see a bunch of SF guys go along on a cross corridor. I thought, whoa. So I wheeled down that corridor, and they're in this little glassed-in office area. So I wheel in, and I said, you guys SF? I said, yeah, they're from some A teams, and they came in and did hospital duty, I don't know, once a week or something. And I said, listen, I got to get a phone. So I said, oh, we've got a phone.
Of course.
So I called MACV-SOG headquarters in Saigon. I told them who I was, and I said, listen, they're trying to medevac me. I said, somebody's got to come and get me out of here. So they said, okay. They said, you know where the emergency room is? I said, yeah. They said, okay, be there tomorrow at noon. I said, okay. So me and my trusty wheelchair go down, and along the way we snag a copy of the Stars and Stripes, wheel down the emergency room, and I find this empty corner, and I kind of back myself into it, and I'm sitting behind the Stars and Stripes back here, kind of trying to be not noticeable or something, so I'm just kind of sitting there waiting. And you know how the emergency have those big swinging doors, right? Back then they did. All of a sudden they go bang, they swing open, right? These 3 guys walk in. One's a major and 2 are I think they were sergeant first class. And they walked up to me and they said, you good? I said, yeah. They said, okay. And the major walks. He says, take care of him. Right? And so the 2 sergeants start wheeling me out. And the major goes over, and some desk over there, he says, I want that man's gear. He said, well, he can't leave. The major, I don't know.
Pulled the big card on him.
Next thing, he's got my gear. They get me in the Jeep, take me out to Tonson Newt, throw me in a Blackbird, and took me back to Pontoon.
Holy cow.
And I spent the next 2 or 3 months, I was the op sergeant in Recon.
Wow. Jeez Louise. Was it a painful recovery from that?
It was.
I
I had those crutches, and I was making it around with them, and then I don't know if you've ever been on crutches, but can be a killer.
Armpits.
So anyway, I finally threw one away, or took it to gave it back to the dispensary, and I made it around. I was hobbling around on one crutch, and then got to the point, and so then I got a cane somewhere, I don't remember where, and I got this cane, so now I'm walking around with a cane, and finally got where I was getting around. I was still using the cane a bit, and they said, listen, go to Bangkok. I'm going to send you to Bangkok for a while, and and go swimming or whatever, try and build your strength up. So I went to Bangkok for, I don't know, a week or 10 days, I think it was. Came back and started, I was running and doing stuff again. And then I went back to Long Ton and went back and did some more jumps because I was afraid I needed to
get back over.
Like falling off the horse, you got to get back. so my first jump, I hit about was coming down. Everything was good. I was about 100 feet, and I just kind of closed my eyes and totally relaxed my body. And then when my feet felt the ground, I just kind of rolled over.
The perfect feeling. Wow. Gosh, that is amazing. It's we've had a great set of questions and a great show today. I'm gonna have to keep getting some questions together and all of that because it seems like we always have a good show and good questions when you joining us. It looks like yeah, we've got them all here covered. Is there anything you'd like to say or share before we close out for the afternoon, sir?
No, I'm happy to do it. Got lots of stories.
I was about to say I'm saving. We just hit the 2-hour mark, and I've got a few stories that I've dug up off the internet. That Don Green mission. I'm thinking maybe we can save that and cover that and another mission for another visit if you'd like to do that.
We can probably find something.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't want to get it all in one and blow everything we had here because we've got some good stuff put back for later. So yeah, I'll start digging some stuff up and we'll do some brainstorming and see if we can get you back for part 2 to share with it. Or God, that would be a part 4 now actually. But guys, that's about it for today. I'll keep you all updated, and we'll see about if we can have a straight mission episode with Mr. John when he joins us again. So
you're gonna make SOAR?
I'm trying to, yes, sir. I'm about to start the registration process. I believe I've got everything together to where I can go.
The sponsor sorted out?
Not yet. I've got a few things in the works, but I'm need to nail one down. Are you going?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well,
yeah, like I said, put my name down if you need to.
Okay. I was just fixing to say I might have to use you as a sponsor then.
All right.
All righty, guys. Well, as you heard here, I'll stay in touch with Mr. John, and we'll get another episode cooked up here soon. And you guys be good, be safe. And Mr. John, thank you for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it as always.
Yeah, I'll take care of them.
Yes, sir.